Wealthy Optimist podcast with your host, Sarah Hall. Hi everyone, it's Sarah Hall, the Wealthy Optimist, and today we're going to be diving into anxiety, anxious thoughts, emotions, and how those emotions can get us carried away, how we can recenter our thoughts and ride through a wave of emotions and turn our mindset around so that it is something more manageable. Now, if you are a human being on this planet, then you have had some kind of emotional stress or frustration or sadness or grief or loss or happiness or excitement or exhilaration in the past day, year, all of your life. You've had a variety of emotions happen to you. And if you're somebody who has, been going through something difficult, the world is collectively going through something difficult. So I can completely understand that probably every single person listening to this has been going through something difficult or has gone through something difficult recently. And if you're somebody that is going through some stuff, then this podcast hopefully will help bring you some relief that, first of all, you're not alone. And second of all, your emotions are always going to come and they're always going to go. Emotions come and they go. That's just the way it is. And you can go through a variety of emotions just through an hour or a day. And when we become anxious and our thoughts become ruminating is when we feel like we're losing control of our mindset and our mental health, and you can begin to spiral. And if you've been there before, then you'll know exactly what I'm saying. That feeling of sudden anxiety creeping into your soul. You don't know why. You don't know what's exactly started it. Or it could be something somebody said that can be taken the wrong way. And then you turn it over in your mind. And suddenly it becomes this overwhelming monster. And it becomes, one tiny little thought can drop into what seems like an ocean of worries. And before you know it, you are spinning out of control, thinking a million thoughts, having some kind of apocalyptic ending happening soon, emanating doom, imminent doom, impending doom. And sometimes these thoughts can also become intrusive. And I do help my clients work through intrusive thoughts with CBT therapy. And if that's something that you're interested in, the link is in my description to book a session with me, or you can just email me at thewealthyoptimist@gmail.com. But I'm going to talk a little bit about stopping those ruminating thoughts here today, because even myself, especially myself, I talk about all these things on my podcast with you because they're things that I've experienced in my own life firsthand, and I've learned ways to deal with them. And I'm constantly evolving and working through how I can better cope with the things that life throws at me. And in doing so, I'm able to teach other people how to cope with the things that life throws at them. And so when you are feeling an overwhelming emotional response to something, the most important thing to do before it starts to get spun out of control is to just breathe. Just breathe. And I know that sounds so corny a lot of the times because we're thinking, that's not going to help. You don't understand. The worst is coming. I'm having an existential crisis. Don't know what I'm doing with my life. Everything can feel so out of control. These past 2 years, we've been through so much mentally, and it's hard to people are talking about this, new normal and what that looks like, and trying to focus on juggling their mental health and going, back to work, or, going through the grief of loss because they've lost loved ones, and now the war is going on between Russia and Ukraine, and, that's stressful and that's worrying, and some of us have family there, and, there's so much that people can get carried away with, and we just need to stop, and we need to breathe. And then we need to take an inventory of our thoughts and distinguish between what is real and what is our anxious mind getting carried away. Our brains work on keeping us alive, okay? Your brain wants to see you survive, and it wants you to survive so badly that it will try to protect you by thinking worries and stressful thoughts and over exaggerating every tiny perceptive threat. Any perceived threat, it will turn into some kind of monster because our brain thinks it is protecting us. But we have to be in control of that, and we have to know when to stop and tell our brains, like, no, we don't need to worry about it that much. It's not really going to happen. We're safe. We are grounded. We are protected. And your breath truly does support you. So just breathing through those thoughts can be the first moment of calming down that anxiety before it begins to spiral. Now, when you're already spiraling, something that I implement a lot, I hear a lot of people say, like, oh, meditate. Well, it can be really hard when you're having a panic attack, man. I don't want to meditate. I can't sit there and be like, all right, I feel like my heart's going to explode, and I'm probably going to die right now, and something horrific is going to happen to everybody I love. But let me just sit here with my eyes closed and empty my mind of all thoughts. Like, that is probably not going to happen. Meditating is something that you should try to do, especially if you're somebody that is anxious and is having mental health issues like depression, anxiety, anything, any kind of mental health issues, or emotional stress. Meditating is an amazing thing to do, and I talk about the simplest meditation in the world in my book, Positive Power: 12 Steps to Mastering Your Mindset. And you should definitely meditate, but when you're in the middle of a panic attack, that's probably not the best time to try to meditate. A really good technique that I use with my clients and on myself is counting backwards from 99. It physically, mentally forces your brain to do something other than spiral. And this takes some practice and time to do this, because it's not as easy to implement as I wish that I could give everybody this magic wand, and when they were feeling anxious and feeling things start to spiral out of control, that there was just this magic fairy dust that I could just sprinkle on you, and you would just instantly feel relieved and know that everything's okay and understand that everything is okay and that you're going to get through this day and tomorrow is going to be even better. And unfortunately, that doesn't exist. But counting backwards from 99 forces your brain to stop what it's doing. So if you're having a million thoughts go through your head and you go 99, 98, oh my God, what's going to happen on Monday? Like, am I going to get in a car accident? 97, 96, 95. Oh my God, I can't believe that person said that to me the other day. 95, 94, 93. Like, you cannot mentally count numbers at the same time as freaking the F out. You just can't do it. Your brain can't do both those things at the same time. So you have to force yourself to go back to counting the numbers. And this, honestly, it sounds so simple and basic. You're like, I'm listening to this podcast, try to get some like real, help on how I can stop my thoughts. Well, you know what? Sometimes it really is just the simplest thing that can help you. Because when you get to a level where you're starting to spiral, you have to stop yourself from spiraling and making it any worse. And by forcing yourself, here's the difference between like trying to meditate versus counting. Meditation's great. I totally recommend, like I said earlier, do it on a daily basis. Like I recommend starting out for like just 5 or 10 minutes a day. Try doing it in the mornings, like after you wake up, try to meditate. There's a great app called Calm. I've been using it for years. It's amazing. I love it. Um, it's excellent. But if you can't just do it without music, then try using the app. I mean, you can pick 5 to 10 minutes. They'll, do like a talk down. It's great. But counting when you're having an actual panic attack forces you to snap your thoughts onto the mental act of counting. And that's just going to slowly help you to calm down. And while you're doing that, force yourself as well to breathe, to focus on a big inhale and a big exhale, on knowing that you are breathing. Because oftentimes, too, I have clients tell me that when they're having a panic attack, they feel like they can't breathe. Now, the good news is that you're always breathing, but when you're having a panic attack, it can feel like you are not. You're definitely not breathing, probably going to die. Your heart feels like it's definitely going to have a heart attack. The physical symptoms of anxiety and a panic attack can be so horrific that I myself, many times over my life, have had to call 911 for certain that I was dying, and had ambulances come to my house, been checked into the hospital, and then be like, it's a panic attack. And I will tell you a little story about my mom, because she never had anxiety her whole life, all right? And this just goes to show that it can happen to anybody and that you're not alone, all right? There are people like me who've had anxiety since they were 9 years old and have always been anxious and trying to figure that out and work through it. And then there are people like my mom who lived their whole life without really having ever experienced a panic attack. And then my older sister passed away. She died of a drug overdose in 2016. And I think it was about 4 or 5 or 6 months after that, maybe 4 months, something like that. My mom, she was at the mall and she had parked her car. And in Canada, in Vancouver, where I'm from, there's like this mall called Metrotown. And there's 3 different layers where you park your car in the underground. And so she parked her car, she went up, and I think she was returning something. She returned it, she came back down, and she couldn't find her car. She couldn't remember where she parked it. And now my mom was going through some horrific grief. I mean, she lost her oldest daughter, had passed away. It's just, no parent should lose their child. It's a horrible, horrible thing to have happened. There's this saying that kids are, it's natural for a child to lose their parent. But you're not supposed to ever lose your child, and that your brothers and sisters are meant to grow up with you side by side. And I'm not saying it right, sorry. But anyways, I digress. I want to tell you the story about my mom's anxiety. And so she can't find her car, and she's freaking out, and she starts to feel this like overwhelming anxiety. And she finally does find her car, but she, in the meantime of looking for a car, I think it was like 10-15 minutes of her like going all over the place, panicking, trying to find it, starting to cry. Now there's a bit of hysteria because she's got this overwhelming grief. She doesn't know what's happening. Feels like she's like losing her mind now. Like, where have I parked this car? What's going on? Then she finds it and she gets into her car and she breaks down. And, granted, the amount of times I've broken down since my sister passed away from the grief of losing her is, I could never even count it. And so she would break down and she cried. And then she started to have this really sharp pain in her chest. And it was to the point that she had to go to the hospital. And she went to the hospital and they ran all kinds of checks on her. And, she was 50 years old and they're worried that she's having a heart attack. And it turns out that it is anxiety, and that my mom experienced her first panic attack. And she thought that she was having a heart attack, 100%. And that story resonates with a lot of people, because there are some some people who have these panic attacks, unfortunately, on a daily basis, and there are other people who can go their entire lives and never have one. I can also tell you a little brief story about an ex of mine, and he didn't understand what having anxiety was like. And I tried to explain it to him one time. And when he ended up losing his business and going bankrupt, um, he couldn't sleep. He stopped sleeping properly, and he was under a lot of stress. And he told me one day that he feels like he has these butterflies in his stomach. And I looked at him and I said, "That's anxiety." And he was thinking, "I don't think so. Like, I think I'm ill or something is happening to me." And I'm like, "Nope, that is literally an anxiety symptom. Anxiety can cause physical symptoms. So if you can use some techniques, even if they're as simple as breathing or counting backwards from 99 or implementing meditation into your morning routine to help you be more calm and centered throughout the day, and you can prevent those anxious spiraling thoughts to turn into a worser version of anxiety, which is a panic attack, which is the physical symptoms, the sweaty palms, the racing heart, the dry mouth, the butterflies in your stomach, the overwhelming feeling of, I'm having a heart attack. If you can prevent that from happening, then you'll slowly start to be more in control of your emotions. And remembering in those times too, when their thoughts are getting out of hand, and understanding that and reassuring yourself, hey, these are emotions. These are thoughts that I'm having. My thoughts are not real. And when I say my thoughts are not real, I don't mean it in the sense that like nothing that you think is real. I mean, our thoughts, like you can have an intrusive thought thinking, well, you're driving down the road. What if I drove into oncoming traffic? You're not going to do that. But intrusive thoughts sometimes pop into our head. You could be waiting for a train at a train station and think, as the train's coming, like, what if I jumped in front of this train right now? Or these thoughts, like, I could say, oh, they're crazy, you know what I mean? But they're actually really normal, natural things that people think. But the difference is that people who have anxiety, and they're called intrusive thoughts, that the difference is that people who have anxiety freak out about those thoughts, and people who don't have anxiety just dismiss them because they go, I'd never do that, that's a silly thought, and they move on with their lives. Whereas somebody who has anxiety and tends to worry more will take that and twist it and turn it and start to think, oh my god, there's something wrong with me, there's something, how could I think these things? But the reality is that you're not going to act on those thoughts. They're not real thoughts. And the reason that you're twisting and turning it is because you're a good person and you don't want those things to happen. And you're getting anxious about those thoughts because you do not want that to happen. And some of them can be fear-based. You're actually very scared of dying. The idea of dying is scary. So that could be an anxiety trigger, thinking, oh my god, no, I don't want that to happen. Why am I thinking that? Is that going to happen? So the important thing when you're going through these things is to remember that these thoughts aren't real, that your emotions are going to come and your emotions are going to go, that there's a natural cycle to the way that we think, and that we're able to slowly learn how to control our emotions, but trying to control them to make them completely stop is only actually going to make things worse. The only way to truly control our emotions is to be able to ride along them like a wave and restructure our thinking patterns so that we can reassure ourselves that those thoughts are just anxious thoughts and they're not real thoughts and they're not actually going to happen. Now, I could talk so much more about this, and I will in other podcasts. I'll dive more into intrusive thoughts in another future episode, and more about specifically why intrusive thoughts happen, what our body and our mind are thinking when those thoughts are happening. But I just wanted to come on here and give you a little bit of a thought process, a little bit of an exercise. If you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling overwhelmed by the events going on in the world right now, there's a couple little techniques that I've talked about, and hopefully you can implement those into your life and hopefully you also feel a little bit reassured knowing that you're not alone. These things and these thoughts happen to everybody. And collectively, we've been going through there's no nice way to say this, a shitstorm. And right when you think it's coming out, right when you think you're on the end of it, suddenly, now there's a threat of, potential World War III, So we've got to just remember to turn off the news, turn off the negativity, have a self-care night. I know tonight after I finish this podcast, I'm going to go and have a movie night. I'm going to turn on, I'm going to light a bunch of candles, have some, popcorn, snuggle up with some of my teddy bears, talk to a friend on the phone, watch a movie, relax, have an early night, and I'm going to take care of myself. Because all day long we're bombarded with worries, anxieties, thoughts, stressors, and in the end, the reality of it is that nothing really matters except taking care of ourselves, because if you can't take care of yourself, you're never going to be happy. And if happiness is the end game, then you have to begin to start letting go of the little things. Because look, it's not the end of the world if the worst case scenario happens and you lose your house tomorrow. You know what I mean? It feels like it would be the end of the world, but it's not actually going to be the end. You're still going to be alive. Your family's still going to be alive. If you lost your job tomorrow, it's not going to kill you. Do you know what I'm saying? There are some things that I can't speak on, obviously. Like, if you have some kind of terminal illness, it's much different. But what I'm talking about is the things that you're thinking when you're worrying, like, about something so minuscule. If you're, like, for example, my sister's going through some issues with her landlord in her house, and it's extremely stressful, and I hate seeing her stressed out. But in the end, you can't control somebody else's actions. You can't control their behavior. The only thing that you can control is how you react to the situation. And if, your landlord wants to say something horrible to you, you can either take that and you can freak out about it for days, and drive yourself crazy and be super stressed out and be on edge and be panicking and being like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do, or you can look at it from a different perspective and say, okay, that's out of my control. That person's acting in such a way. I'm not going to let that affect me. And instead, I'm going to think of some solutions. But first, I'm going to do a little bit of self-care. I'm going to do a little bit of counting. I'm going to take some deep breaths. I'm going to go meditate for 10 minutes. I'm going to go have a hot bath. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to turn off my phone. There's so many things you can do. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to get some fresh air. I'm going to go out for a walk for 15 minutes. And I'm going to leave my phone at home. How often do you do something like that? How often do you ever turn off your phone? That can be such an anxiety relief in itself. In and of itself, just turning off your phone for an hour of you time. When's the last time you did that? Why don't you do that tonight? I hope this helps. I hope that somebody listening gets some value from this. If you did get some value from it, I'd really appreciate it if you shared it with somebody, because, like I said, we're all collectively going through an absolute shitstorm right now, and every little bit that we can do to help each other, to support each other, and to show each other some love is really valuable. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Have a good night. Bye. We'll see you on the next show. Until then, stay wealthy and stay optimistic.